Good morning. Today we are going to talk about Dr. W. Edwards Deming and the influence that he has had on quality. This is something which is it's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. Let me first talk about what we will be discussing today. The lecture will be divided into a number of modules, and there are 6 modules as you see over here. The first one will be a brief introduction to Dr. Deming, who he was, what his overall work related to, and then I will talk about the system of profound knowledge that he wrote about. The next 4 modules will refer to the 4 elements of the system of profound knowledge, which is the appreciation of a system, the theory of knowledge, the knowledge of variation, and finally the psychology of individuals, society, and change. The last module then will focus on Deming's 14 points, and these are the 14 points which I think Deming is very well known for. He is known for a number of different things, but a lot of people do associate him with the 14 points, and so if I were to cover him in terms of his system of profound knowledge and some parts of his 14 points, I don't think I will cover each one of the 14 points because it's not necessary. A lot of those are covered in the 4 modules of the system of profound knowledge, but there are a few of the 14 points that I think do need specific elaboration, and we'll talk about them in the last module. So if we begin the first module talking about an introduction to Dr. W. Edwards Deming and his system of profound knowledge. To understand who was Deming, there are a number of different ways in which we can describe him. He was a statistician. He is probably well known for a lot of the work that he has done in statistics, in things like sampling, as well as in statistical process control. But at the same time, he is well known as a quality expert as well as a management guru. What he was able to see was he was not restricted by any one field, but he really saw the interrelationships between a number of different areas, and he looked at systems rather than a very narrow focused perspective of quality or statistics, but he saw statistics in the broader context of quality, and he saw quality in the broader context of management, and he saw management in the broader context of systems. Okay. Interestingly, although he is known as a statistician, but his PhD was in physics from Yale. And that is quite surprising because he is not known for any particular work that he is known to have done in the area of physics. So he was obviously a multifaceted person who is also known for a significant amount of work that he has done in Japan to help the Japanese recover from the devastation of World War II. As you see over here, he was a student of Walter Shewhart. Shewhart was a statistician, a well-established statistician at Bell Labs, and what we typically refer to now as the Deming cycle, some of you may be familiar with, called the PDSA cycle, was originally a Shewhart cycle, and of course Deming did modify the cycle, and he added a lot of value to it, which has given it, and then from then on that cycle was known as the Deming cycle. He basically taught statistical quality control in the US, and he conducted a number of training programs in the 1940s as well as mostly in the 1940s, and this was around the time of World War II, and he was also in great demand overseas as well. After the war in 1947, and I was not aware of this, but he also visited India in 1947. I don't have much detail about his visit to India and what he did during that visit, but he was on his way from here on to Japan, but he has been in India in the past. Now, in the period following World War II, what he was disappointed with is, although in the 1940s people were very keen to learn from him a lot of what he had to offer in terms of statistical quality control, in terms of sampling techniques, but following the World War II, what he found was that in the US there was a shift in the focus of industry, and that quality took a backseat to production numbers. Since that was a time when, due to the war, there was a lot of extra capacity, due to the end of war I should say, there was a lot of extra capacity that was made available. So there was a tremendous boom in the economy as there was a lot of demand from the soldiers coming back, and so companies were too busy making volumes, making numbers, and the focus that Deming had created on quality seemed to wane away. And he for a long time then, as we will see shortly, he went into some kind of an oblivion. But this was a lesson that he learned, that part of the problem was that when he was teaching quality to the American companies, he was primarily teaching to the engineers and the technical people. He had not got that commitment and buy-in from top management, and this was a lesson that he had learnt as a result of this experience, and he had promised himself that he would not repeat this mistake again, which was borne out by his experience in Japan and subsequently as well. In 1947, he was recruited by the Supreme Command of the Allied Powers, which was the structure for the end of the war, and this was to help prepare for the 1951 Japanese census. Now, when he went there, and what he found was that the Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers, which is better known as JUICE, some of you might be familiar, they had been familiar with Schuhart's statistical quality control theories, and they also got to know about Deming, and they therefore invited him to come and work with them, teaching them some of these techniques. So he conducted seminars for the Japanese research workers, the plant managers, and engineers. He conducted several such training sessions in Japan, and these sessions were typically very popular in Japan. In fact, in a lot of them, if you read some of the books, you hear mention of the fact that there was standing room only, where there were more than 500 people attending sessions on statistical process control and statistical quality control. But the one thing which, as he had learned from his prior experience in the US, he made sure that when he was teaching these techniques to the Japanese, that he first got to talk to the business leaders, that means the top executives, the CEOs, and the owners of businesses, and got their commitment and buy-in before he went about teaching the specific techniques to the engineers and the technicians. And this perhaps was one of the smartest things that he did, because as a result of this, he was able to ensure the acceptance of the techniques and thereby the sustainability of the methods that he was talking about. Okay. The other thing that you notice here is that he did not accept any fees for his lectures in Japan. And I think a number of you may be familiar with the Deming Prize, which is perhaps one of the most sought after quality awards internationally. And this was something that was started in Japan. It's kind of ironic that the Deming Prize was not started in the US, Deming being an American, but it was started in Japan. And the prize was started with the help of the fees that were what he would have been paid for his lectures. He refused to accept any fees and basically donated these back to Jews, from which corpus the Deming Prize was initiated, and it is still, like I said, one of the most coveted prizes related to quality in the world. After he came back from Japan, after teaching them about quality and seeing significant amount of improvement in the quality, productivity, and therefore the basic economic resurgence of Japan, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a typo over here. It should say he became an unknown. Back when he came back to the US after his stint in Japan, people in the US sort of forgot about him. He went into some kind of an oblivion. He continued to do some consulting work, but he was teaching also at the New York University for a period of time. And nobody heard or spoke about Deming until 1980. Okay, and it's sort of very interesting because he got rediscovered in the US at the age of 80. Now, I don't know how many people have the good fortune of starting like a second innings, if you will, at the age of 80, but that is precisely what Deming did. And what happened then was that NBC, which is one of the three major TV networks in the US, was planning to make a program, a TV show, and the title of that TV show was "If Japan Can, Why Can't We?" Now, this was the time period 1980, after the oil shock, when the US auto industry and the US companies overall were facing some significant challenges from the Japanese, and everybody was asking the question, what is it that the Japanese know that we don't, and what has happened to the American ingenuity? And while the producer of NBC, who was producing this particular show, did some research to find out what would be an interesting story, that is how this lady, it was a lady who was producing the show, she then discovered Deming, because somebody mentioned to her that Deming is the one who had been to Japan and he had taught the Japanese about quality. And the interesting thing about that particular show was, and this actually reflects on Deming's personality to some extent, because he was very strongly of the opinion that a lot of the problems in companies and organizations are due to management faults and management errors or management lapses. And he usually did not mince any words when he spoke to management about some of the things that they needed to do. And one of the famous incidents that took place during that particular show was, I forget, it was a chief executive of a company who was interviewing Dr. Deming at that time. And he basically asked Dr. Deming, he said, you talk about these various things, your 14 points and number of good things to look at. But now I've got a company to run. Okay, what do you recommend that I do when I go back on Monday morning to my office? What should be the first few things that I should be doing? And Deming very coolly looks at this person, a very prominent top executive of a large company, and he says, "Are you trying to tell me you don't know what your job is?" And the executive really didn't know which way to look. And that was really Deming's point. His point was that people at the top of manufacturing organizations in the US knew how to play a number of games, but they didn't know what their job was. And really speaking, if people understood what he was talking about, it would help them re-evaluate their roles and be more effective. After this particular show was aired, Deming became a household name. Everybody and their father-in-law wanted to hire Deming because companies realized the deep problems that they were in, and they wanted him to come and help and work with them. He made sure that before he took on any assignment that he had the commitment of the top management, otherwise he would not enter that particular company. He continued to work with a number of US companies, and he kept on conducting a number of public seminars, which were 4-day seminars. Interestingly, he conducted these seminars right up to the point before he passed away at the age of 94, sometime around 1994. I had the good fortune to actually attend an event, a conference in which Deming was giving a talk. This would have been around 1992. And the thing that I do remark, I had the opportunity, just to briefly meet with him and get his autograph, if you will, on the program for that particular conference. But at the age of 92, this person who had spent his entire life talking about quality had not lost the basic gleam in his eye, that excitement, that interest that he had. He was constantly trying to learn. He was constantly trying to create new knowledge. One of the things that I'm told, I did not see this, but in one of the 4-day seminars that he had conducted shortly before he passed away, it seemed that in between sessions, there was a nurse, and he had to be taken in a wheelchair, and he was on IV, but when he was doing his lectures, that nurse and the wheelchair disappeared. So he was so driven and so focused on his material that he would continue to do this literally up to the end. Great man, and he has left a legacy. We have a number of Deming study groups in the US. I happen to belong to one, which is the Detroit Deming study group. When I visit the US, I do make contact with the other members, and they do send me information. I keep getting invited to their meetings. I meet once a month. But there are a number of very avid Deming followers the world over, and some of his teachings are extremely profound, as we will see today. I'll briefly introduce you to Deming's system of profound knowledge, which we see over here consists of 4 basic modules. Now, to understand the evolution of Deming, this is probably one of the last few things that Deming actually developed, the system of profound knowledge. And this would have been sometime, I think, in the mid to late 80s. And so if you see some of the earlier works and books of Deming, you will not see any mention of the system of profound knowledge. But his last book, which is The New Economics, which was published, I think, sometime towards the end of the 1980s or early 1990s, that is where he first talks about the system of profound knowledge. What basically he is talking about over here is that there are 4 foundations okay, foundation blocks, if you will, which need to be understood when we are talking about understanding systems and how to improve systems. And these include, number one, an appreciation of a system; number two, theory of knowledge; number three, knowledge of variation; and number four, psychology of individuals, society, and change. And what you also see is that each one of these is interconnected with all of the others. So these are not independent. They have a significant amount of overlap and interrelationships with the other modules. And we will be taking a look at each one of these in more detail subsequently. This is one particular interpretation of the system of profound knowledge, and that particular interpretation or a perspective is that the system of profound knowledge works like a lens. That means it changes our perspective with which we observe things, with which we observe systems, we analyze systems, and we manage and improve systems. And as we will go through the whole process of the four elements or the four modules of the system of profound knowledge, I think you'll come to better appreciate how the system of profound knowledge works as a lens, because as you look through a lens, things are seen or perceived differently. This brings us to the end of our first module, and we will continue in the next module with the appreciation of a system.